the design decisions that have allowed Red Bull to dominate. The Red Bull RB18 has emerged as the best of the 2022 Formula One cars, particularly on Sundays, and may be the best the Milton Keynes-based team has ever produced. But how did they do it? What key decisions did they make? And how did their preference for Max Verstappen help them? Buckle up, because we're going to answer all of those questions in this video, so let's get started. The most remarkable aspect of Red Bull's campaign has been that it did not begin the year as the fastest car. It had to overtake the Ferrari's F175. There's no silver bullet that explains why the RB18 has been so successful under the current rules. Instead, it's a combination of factors, some built in from the start and others added later, that work in tandem to create a fantastic overall package. Let's take a look at some of the unique features of the RB18, as well as some that have been adopted by other teams. Suspension. When it came to the overall suspension layout that was in use for the last regulation era, between 2009 and 2021, Red Bull established a new standard. Since the RB5, the team has used a pull rod rear suspension and a push rod front suspension. This was deemed the best option, aerodynamically speaking, under the rules, as all outfits agreed it was the best way to approach things. There were some outliers, however, as the pull rod method was also tried at the front end. After considering the impact of suspension on the new 2022 cars, Red Bull decided to flip the script for 2022, opting for a push rod layout at the rear to make room for the RB18's enlarged diffuser and pull rod at the front. Another intriguing aspect of the RB18's front suspension design is that the team continues to use a single element wishbone element, though this year it's applied to the top forwardmost arm, as the setup is positioned opposite to what it was before. The steering assembly, which had previously been buried within the chassis over the previous 2 seasons, has been returned to its more natural habitat at the front of the bulkhead as part of the 2022 repackaging efforts. In general, the front bulkhead is the heavy, strong part of the nose to which the suspension, front wing, dampers and springs are attached. Brakes. During the first half of the season, we saw Red Bull deliver incremental improvements in the inner front brake duct fairing. Due to an increase in wheel rim size this season, up from 13 inches to 18, the brake discs have grown in diameter as well, now measuring around 50 millimeters larger. The drill holes that extend from the center of the disc to its edge, on the other hand, are more restricted, with a minimum diameter of 3 millimeters permitted. Cooling holes in the pads are also no longer permitted. The larger brake duct drum that now resides within the wheel well clearly has an impact on the design of numerous components, with the airflow and heat exchange of the assembly also altered. In response, Red Bull and several of its competitors developed an internal brake disc fairing, which isolates the brake disc within the much larger drum and modifies the passage of air into, around, and away from the brake disc to help moderate the temperatures that will result. To avoid the Goldilocks effect of being neither too hot nor too cold, Red Bull has frequently made minor changes to the shape of the fairing, as well as its contents. Floor. The new regulations place an even greater emphasis on the performance of the floor and diffuser, with sensitivity to changes in ride height influencing several aspects of its design. The increased complexity of the floor, diffuser, and its supplementary components has also resulted in a weight gain compared to before, which the teams are constantly striving to reduce in order to reduce lap time without sacrificing durability. The FIA had attempted to rein in some of the extreme solutions seen on the edge of the track in recent seasons, while not completely stifling design originality. Red Bull chose not to use the permitted edge wing, as some of its competitors did. Interestingly, it appears to have drawn inspiration from the 2021 regulations, which resulted in the Z-shaped cutouts ahead of where teams were required to taper the back corner of the floor. Just ahead of this is a horseshoe-shaped cutout, that also creates a split level in the floor, with the shorter section behind it being at a different height and with a noticeably different contour than that ahead of it. It has made numerous efforts to optimize this portion of the floor in order to improve performance, both around the upper surface of the floor, side pod, and underfloor. This has resulted in the addition of a gurney-style flap to the front corner of the floor, as well as changes to the size and shape of the blister and channel formed on the edge of the side pod. The underfloor design on the RB18 has several intriguing aspects, with the team not simply accepting the conventional shapes and forms you'd expect the various elements to take. For example, the front section of the floor has some unexpected contouring that works in tandem with the forward strake. When compared to many of the other teams, this is a very unique design. But it wasn't just the designs that contributed to Red Bull's success. It was also their approach to developing their car that set them apart from other teams. The development of a Formula One car should point in one direction: improved performance. That means more downforce, as well as improved characteristics that unlock greater performance potential. Effectively, it's about eliminating, or rather pushing back against, whatever limitation is currently holding you back. And based on their comments, this has evolved in a way that is moving away from Sergio Perez, but, in the words of Max Verstappen, is now in a much better window for him. As a result, there have been complaints that the team is favouring Verstappen at the expense of Perez's prospects. But, as Max Verstappen explains, it's not quite that simple. In general, we always try to make the car faster, and whatever they bring to the car, you have to adapt to that. That's certainly what I've been doing. Of course, I say what I would like for my car in general, but the upgrades on the car are not specifically designed around me. It's just more pace. He would say something like that, wouldn't he? But he's also correct. When it comes to limiting the speed of the car, the driver plays a role. After all, you can build a car that's theoretically faster, but if the driver is unable to consistently operate within that window, the reality is that it's slower. Every driver, including Verstappen, will reach a point where the car is too difficult to control to extract the pace consistently. Every driver has a preferred balance, but it reflects what they're comfortable with and how actively they can exploit the car with those characteristics. As a general rule, the best drivers thrive when their car balance is consistent but not too mellow. Drivers use absolute terms like understeer and oversteer, and while those are detectable, they are also partly in the eye of the beholder. What appears to one driver as an understeer issue may appear to another as a reasonable balance. What is happening with the Red Bull drivers this year is a great example of this. The Red Bull was more of an understeery car in its early season form, which suited Perez. Verstappen felt this created an artificial ceiling for how he could attack the corner entry, but Perez was able to get more out of it in the slower corners at times. Verstappen appears to have gotten more out of the car, as it's evolved to be a little more aggressive. Some may argue that this is conclusive proof that Verstappen is being favoured, but there's another factor. Building an F1 car is a monumental task, and building one that can compete for wins is even more difficult. The balance of performance, drivability, and durability is always an important consideration. A car must be fast, handle steadily enough so that the driver does not crash every lap, and conserve tyres throughout the race, so that it can see the checkered flag without making 10 pit stops. And, as it turns out, having a car that is more prone to oversteering helps maximise two of those factors. The first is performance, which is actually quite simple. If the front end is slow to respond on turn-in, your entry speed will be slow as well. While the rear stays planted, the front grip determines how quickly you can rotate the car. The car with the more lively rear end will inevitably be faster, as long as it does so in a predictable and controllable manner. As a result, an understeery car effectively creates a ceiling that is unbreakable, no matter how hard you try. Yes, drivers can use techniques like trail braking to shift the balance to a more drivable position, but this is also constrained by front grip. Then there's durability, which in this case means being able to conserve tyres. Drivers rarely suffer more degradation in the rear than in the front in F1. We won't pretend that it doesn't happen, but the front tyres are usually the first to go. And, as you might expect, understeer is the leading cause of front tyre failure worldwide. What Red Bull has done is what many other teams have done before it. It has widened the performance envelope in a way that a great driver can make the most of. While it's true that Verstappen's skill set allows him to exploit this, the net result for Red Bull is a faster car. So, there you have it. Let us know what you think. Is there a single design element that you believe has allowed Red Bull to be so fast? Do you believe the car's development has been a case of favoritism for Max Verstappen, or simply getting the most out of the car? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe.